So hello, everybody. I know that Brian already knows who I am, but for you that don't, for you that don't know who I am, my name is Darren Smith, and I am the Substance Misuse Prevention Coordinator for the Greater Sullivan County area. So my job is to do substance misuse prevention and help out with some mental health support within my community. You might know Andrea Smith, who's the SMP for the Upper Valley, and we're always here to help you as a resource if you need anything related to substance misuse. So I will kick it off to you, Kim.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Kim Coronis. I'm with Breathe, New Hampshire, and we are a lung health organization and nonprofit focused on issues, of course, concerning lung health. As people know, the vaping issues and concerns have been around for a few years now, but overall, these are some of the other things that Breathe New Hampshire focuses on. We are a nonprofit, so we don't receive state funds, but we get a lot of our funding from individual donors, some business donors, and then things like our fund pass to raise money. Programs we have are related to asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, clean air, obviously vaping and nicotine and tobacco issues related to youth and adults. And then for me personally, I'm the policy and program manager, so I do work a little bit with elected officials on different policies. For this program in particular, one of our funders through a grant was New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. For tonight, these are kind of the topics that we're going to hit upon related to vaping, just the overall points that we'd like to make. I'll try to get through the content, and if you can hold your questions till the end, that way we kind of can discuss them as a group if people have time for that. But if there's something really urgent, please stop me through the presentation. So overall, a little bit about the history of e-cigarettes. The first e-cigarette came about in 2003, so now quite a while ago. The product was created in China. It was a pharmacist who was trying to help his father quit smoking. The way he was going to do that was by creating an electronic device that had nicotine-based cartridges. He was going to gradually lower the levels of nicotine in the cartridges that his father used, with the hopes of eventually getting him off the use of nicotine products altogether. A few years later, 2007, the first products were introduced here in the US, obviously imported at that time. A couple of years after that, the World Health Organization actually declared that electronic nicotine delivery systems, or ENDS, were not a legitimate smoking cessation aid or smoking cessation tool. They are still not approved as a smoking cessation aid in the US. There are some things that are in an experimental category, but overall, there are other forms of nicotine replacement that are recommended to help people quit smoking. We became one of the first states to actually have a law to prohibit the sales of e-cigarettes to minors, and that was way back in 2010, when the laws for tobacco products were sales to people 18 and over. So that's been a few years now since that occurred. More recently, in 2016, the FDA, by deeming rule, regulated all e-cigarettes as tobacco products. So they do fall under the tobacco product category. And that will be important as we share some of the other information. A couple of years after that ruling, there were specific laws that came about as far as Juul, because at that time, Juul was one of the more prevalent and popular products by people of all ages, and especially young people. So at that point, a regulation was passed to ban the flavored pods for sale in retail locations. It didn't mean Juul could not make them. It just meant they were less available. They were still out on the market, but not in their typical retail locations. There's been some other regulations more recently, 2019, raising the tobacco age from 18 to 21. We also did that in New Hampshire a few months later. And we can go into that in a little bit. In January 2020, the FDA announced that it would ban flavored cartridge-based e-cigarettes. which sounds great, except there are a lot of products out there that are not cartridge based. So you still have all these flavors for other types of products. And then more recently, as we were saying, there's some pre-market applications. There's thousands of applications that the FDA has to review. So there's products out there that still have not had their applications reviewed. And that's the difficulty with the e-cigarette market and that category of business. More recently, this is what I alluded to and mentioned, they authorized a couple of products by RJ Reynolds for adults who are trying to quit smoking. In other words, these are going to be studied. They're not saying they're safe for adults. They just want to see if it is a helpful tool for adults who are already smokers who want to quit smoking. They're not suggesting that adults take this up. So overall, when you look at all the products out there, what's the legal age for all these different things that are on the market, whether it's snuff, strips, sticks, orbs, the old-fashioned chew tobacco, cigars. Well, the legal age for all these products is 21. They are all regulated as tobacco products, including hookah. Now we're going to get a little more into specifics about vaping. So overall, vaping is the inhaling and exhaling of an aerosol that's produced by an e-cigarette or similar battery-powered device. Again, the key fact here is to recognize that it's an aerosol. It is not a water vapor. So nicotine, flavorings, other chemicals are heated up at a variety of temperatures and they form an aerosol. What all e-cigarettes do have in common, whether they're small or large in size, is they have a battery source. Usually it's a lithium battery. They have a coil or a spring-like thing. That's the atomizer. That's what the liquids and chemicals and flavorings travel over. That's what heats that mixture up so the person can inhale it. Some vapes are made to be refillable, so you'll see flavored liquids that come in different vials or packages. Others are preloaded with cartridges that actually have the atomizer built into the cartridge where the flavor and the chemicals are. And then basically, no matter what the size or shape of the device, they do all create an aerosol. Again, getting back to that history, the timeline we looked at. So the first e-cigarette looked like a cigarette. It was heavy, clunky, not appealing to youth because it looked like a cigarette, and it also only had nicotine cartridges. The original ones were pretty price prohibitive too. They were about $165 and up for the starter kit, and it had typical like charger like we have for our cell phones. So that's how it was used. Wasn't a battery thing that could be thrown away back then. It was a rechargeable unit with replaceable nicotine cartridges. The center images are pods or modifiable are tanks or modifiable systems. The center images, this is when flavors were being introduced because you could pre-fill that tank section of the device with a flavored liquid of your choice. The components in these were variable. That's where the modifiable term comes from. You could change the size of the mouthpiece, change the size of the battery. You could add different flavor combinations that you wanted to use. Changing the size of the battery creates a different amount of aerosol. That's why battery size can be important. And then moving forward, more recent times, we've seen the introduction of a lot of what is called disposable e-cigarettes or disposable vape devices. So just the evolution overall, this is a diagram from the Centers for Disease Control, and it's interesting because the first, second, and third generation, fourth generation, we're actually going back to the first generation again, where disposables are prevalent and actually the popular thing right now. Price point being one of the reasons they're so popular, plus the variety of flavors that they're available in. So those of you that are in health-related fields or public health fields that work with youth are probably aware of the variety of surveys that are out there, health surveys. One of them is the National Youth Tobacco Survey. This one is important in that it is specifically focused on youth tobacco use. It is similar to the YRBS Youth Risk Behavior Survey, but this is more focused on tobacco, whereas YRBS is general health questions. Back in 2020, the findings then showed a sharp decline in youth e-cigarette use, which was great news. But because of the strength and the potency of some of the levels of the nicotine in some of these devices and in some of the disposables, a lot more kids were potentially getting addicted to the nicotine. The other thing about this survey to keep in mind is this occurred at the initial stages of COVID. The survey normally would have taken place for 3 or 4 months. They had to cut it short because people went to remote learning. So we're not sure how taking a smaller sample size and how shortening the length of time of the survey may have impacted the results. But it could be good news in that fewer kids were using the products, but unfortunately, again, more were reliant and dependent upon nicotine because of the higher levels of nicotine in some of the products that were available. Again, we haven't had a recent youth risk behavior survey done in New Hampshire. I think they are in the works in some communities. The last one that was done came out with the results in 2019, and unfortunately, it showed that for high school youth rates, New Hampshire had one of the highest in the country. The 33.8% represents the number of students that said yes to the question, have you vaped once in the last 30 days prior to the survey? So if they answered yes, they only needed to have vaped one time in the 30 days prior to the survey, not multiple times, but they could have also vaped multiple times. The other thing to remember is, yes, that number is high, but you also have 66% of the students that answered no to having vaped once in the last 30 days. And that's high school students. So what are the concerns with vaping? Well, one of the prime concerns is the nicotine as an ingredient, as a substance in vaping devices and in liquids. We know nicotine is a powerful mood altering substance. It is found naturally in tobacco leaves. It's highly addictive, highly toxic. Unfortunately, the new thing with some of the newer vapes that are out there is synthetic nicotine products, which they were skirting the FDA regulations as far as nicotine levels. And also because the product is being made in the lab, there was even less known about it. One concern from a public health standpoint is our brains are still developing into our early 20s. And this is something we try to really stress with the kids, letting them know that these devices, use of substance impacts your brain, which is still developing into your early 20s. It's the last organ in the body to fully develop. We all need our brain just to see, hear, smell, taste, feel. The cells, the neurons in our brain carry the messages between the brain and other parts of the body. Introduction of substances like nicotine can start to harm those neurons, and in fact, the messaging between parts of your body may not work as well if you continue to use substances. And basically, drugs of all types can change the way that the neurons talk to each other. What happens with the use of nicotine? Nicotine directly impacts the reward center of the brain. Again, if you think of the fact that the brain is still developing, it also develops from back to front. So the frontal lobe of the brain is the last part of the brain to develop. Unfortunately, when nicotine's inhaled, it reaches the reward center of the brain very quickly, in 7 to 20 seconds, depending on what type of device, whether it's a combustible cigarette or a vape, whatever the person's using, that can increase or decrease the amount of time that the nicotine hits the brain with. Keeping in mind that it's the reward center of the brain. Our reward center, under normal circumstances, releases dopamine and adrenaline, which can make us feel good. So when nicotine triggers the release of dopamine or adrenaline, the person that's vaping or smoking will have that temporary feeling of a rush or feeling good. That's why in some cases, people want to return to the use of these products. They want that good feeling. Unfortunately, because nicotine interrupts the circuits of the brain, it's interrupting the patterns of the brain that control attention and learning, which is especially harmful with younger people. And because kids' brains are still developing, they are uniquely susceptible to nicotine addiction faster than adults would be. Again, the front part of the brain being the last to develop, that's where we make decisions. That's how actions are controlled. So when someone is using substances, that's the part of the brain that becomes less able to make good judgments. That's why you may see behavior changes in young people. These are some of the things that directly are impacted by nicotine, just reactions, moodiness, calmness, confidence, self-control, and willpower. These are things that use of nicotine can interrupt and impact. Another thing we try to relay to young people is that we can't replace the brain. You can't go up to a vending machine and get a new brain. So changes in the brain can lead to future addiction. Also, some of these changes can be harmful and can be permanent. Another impact of nicotine on the body and why it is dangerous, less than half a teaspoonful of a nicotine-containing e-cigarette or vape solution can be fatal to the average toddler and to small pets. And a lot of people are like, well, why would that happen? A little bit later, we're going to show you some of the packaging of some of the liquids and how the vapes are promoted. When you think about products that are approved by the FDA that are on store shelves, whether it's the grocery store or in a pharmacy, in just general products we buy, a lot of things have warning labels. A lot of times we don't read the warning labels because we're aware and we know of the product that we're buying. When you think about the nicotine solutions or the vape solutions, a lot of them are very colorful labels. They're supposed to be in childproof bottles, but if some of the liquid is on a counter and somebody touches it and then touches their face, their nose, or their mouth, for a young child, if they lick their fingers after touching it, that's how some accidental exposures have occurred. These chemical mixtures can actually burn skin or irritate skin. That's why they're dangerous. And of course, with some of the flavors involved, that's where some young children have actually ingested a significant amount and been really harmed very badly. The other thing with pets, why would pets go after this stuff? It's the smells. A lot of pets like treats. When you think of dogs and you think of ice cream stands in the summer, a lot of ice cream stands sell a dog dish size treat. So pets are attracted to the sweet smells as well. Some of the effects and withdrawal symptoms. Again, everybody's going to be different, not only youth to youth, but youth to adult. There's a lot of variables when it comes to vaping. There's the size of the device, there's the nicotine solution and the strength of it. There's how much aerosol the person's inhaling, how often they take a hit off the device. There's a lot of variables. There's more inconsistencies and more variables with these devices than there are with cigarettes. So some of the effects, the alertness, reduced appetite, palpitations, increased blood pressure. The alertness could be taken to be a good thing, but again, you're also impacting your body negatively. Some of the withdrawal symptoms, again, not everybody's going to have all the same symptoms, just hunger, tremor, headaches. Unfortunately, for teens, they may have less severe withdrawal symptoms when they try to give up nicotine, but they're going to be hooked on the nicotine more quickly than adults because their brains are still developing. Another thing that came about with vaping products, and Juul, the company, was one of the first to come out with this nicotine salt formula. It's still a liquid, but it's a different process with creating the vape solution. What they did was develop a combination of chemicals and a delivery system so that there was a less harsh hit to the back of the throat of the user. A lot of people, when they take the first drag off a cigarette, have a cough or a gag reflux because of the harshness of the chemicals hitting the back of the throat. Juul found a way to actually minimize that harsh hit to the back of the throat. So first-time users of their product were less apt to notice the harshness of the chemicals. Also, when you add in the fact that all these products have flavors, again, the flavors cover up the harshness of the other chemicals, especially for first-time users. We talked about how young kids get a hold of some of this stuff or mistake it for something that they're used to. These are some examples of why accidental exposures occur. The images on the right, the Max Loops, they look like Fruit Loops. The berry combinations of flavors look like fruit. You have something called Max Fish that looks like the candy Swedish fish. So again, a lot of the labeling, because they're promoting the flavors, looks like products that younger children may be familiar with. There was actually a company that came out a few years ago with a coupon offer for their products, but their coloring made it look very similar to Box Tops for Education, which was a national program. We talked about the difference, cigarettes versus vapes a little bit. Well, here's one of the distinguishing factors. For somebody that smokes cigarettes, cigarettes in this country come 22 a pack. As you smoke cigarettes, you notice the empty slots in the pack of cigarettes that you have if it's your pack of cigarettes. You're less apt to notice how much e-solution you're vaping or how much of a pod you're vaping because there's really no gauge. Again, cigarettes, 2 or 3 are missing from a pack. It's lunchtime, you go out and have another one, you come back, maybe 4 cigarettes, 5 cigarettes by the end of the day. You see those empty slots in the pack, you know what you've used. Unfortunately, with some of these flavored products and different nicotine strengths of the products, people are actually vaping, in some cases, more nicotine than somebody who smokes a pack a day. Juul pods, the pre-filled pods that Juul sells, that's equivalent, the nicotine levels are equivalent to about 41 cigarettes. Puff bar, another disposable type of device, it's about 50 cigarettes in one of the puff bar units if you were to vape the whole thing. And then Soren is another pod system, and one of their pods is about the equivalent of 90 cigarettes. Again, just to make people aware that the nicotine levels are extremely high. Also, if somebody is trying to vape and quit smoking at the same time, a lot of people, adults, might smoke cigarettes on their way to work in their car or at home before they leave for work. Their work environment is a place where smoking is not allowed. So they can more easily take a quick hit off a vape device. Unfortunately, they may be introducing themselves to more nicotine than they would if they stuck with one product or device or the other. So dual use, 2 or more nicotine containing products can be harmful to the person if they don't really keep track of how much they're taking in. As I mentioned earlier, the newer products, the disposables, the nicotine contents are very high. Juul came out originally in the US with a 2 and 4% nicotine. That was considered high. Some of these disposable products, meaning they're used and then thrown away, are 5 and 6% nicotine. And again, they're all flavored. And they're very inexpensive. For some of these, you're talking some of the buy one, get one sales. You can get 2 devices for under $10. One of the things that we have to be aware of with nicotine and addiction is for some people, especially if they're younger and their brains are still developing, occasional use can lead to more regular use. And then in some cases, people become totally dependent. People may have someone in their family or be aware of somebody that they know that is still smoking cigarettes while on oxygen. Unfortunately, that person has become totally dependent. It's not that they don't want to quit smoking. They're just at a point where they feel like they have to have the nicotine, and nobody can easily quit nicotine or nicotine products or smoking. For most people, it's going to take 20 to 30 attempts. Some people do have success quitting cold turkey, but that's a small minority. We mentioned that the industry itself is not fully regulated. These products entered the market before we were really aware of them in this country. They are regulated as tobacco products, but with all the applications that different companies file for their products, it's very difficult to keep up. There's at least 450 brands of vape devices with thousands of different flavors because they all have their different unique formulas for their chemicals. So again, keeping in mind that the aerosol itself can contain harmful chemicals, Most vapes do contain nicotine. There are very few that are nicotine free. Nicotine is highly addictive. The chemicals in the vapes, or the flavors in the vapes are from chemicals. They may advertise their product as you using an FDA approved flavor, but the flavor that they're talking about is meant for a food product that you ingest and that your system can digest over time. Again, just some examples of the packaging and the reasons that some young children can confuse some of these e-liquids or vapes with candy or other things that they're used to seeing in the grocery store. These are some samples of chemicals or some of the more common chemicals found in e-liquids and vapes. It does not mean that every single brand has these chemicals, but these are some of the ones that stand out. Again, when speaking with young people, these chemicals, they would not heat up and inhale by themselves. The combinations of the chemicals and the flavorings and the smoother delivery system make it more appealing to students. But individually, they would never consider inhaling these chemicals. Unfortunately, the other thing that results is when you take a mixture of 6 to 60 chemicals heated up at a variety of temperatures, you're creating other aerosols. And the other thing with these mixtures is the aerosols are created by traveling over that atomizer, that coil that we talked about. Just like any engine or car parts, over time, the metal finish can wear off that heating coil. Those small, minute particles from the metal finish can actually get into the aerosol and also be inhaled by the user. And our lungs cannot easily expel fine particles like that build up over time. Another concern is environmental issues. Some of you may do or be aware in your communities of the drug take back days that are promoted twice a year. Sometimes also these things are discussed during Red Ribbon Week events. Unfortunately, with the vape devices, a lot of them have lithium batteries, which is a concern. Also, you're talking about very heavy oil-based nicotine solutions that are in the cartridges and in the vape. So all of that stuff is getting added to the landfill. So there's actually been some issues and concerns with this stuff building up in landfills and becoming a hazard. Depending on the groups, we do Vaping Unveiled for both middle school and high school students. Depending on the school, sometimes we're asked to address the use of marijuana a little bit. So this is our adult content that I'm using now. So we do talk about marijuana. One of the concerns is marijuana wax or the use of dabbing products. It looks like wax. And for some people, what they're doing is they're taking apart the vaping device and actually putting the dab or the wax directly on the heating coil in the vape and then inhaling it directly. There's concerns with taking apart vaping devices because they're not meant to be taken apart, especially the smaller ones. The THC levels, the psychoactive component or ingredient in marijuana, is also at much higher levels than it used to be. Years ago, 5 to 10% THC was considered strong. And again, keeping in mind it's a hallucinogenic component in marijuana. Sometimes the levels of THC is now anywhere from 40 to 80%, again, because it's available in more places, more people are growing their own, making their own products. This is a concern. There are some possible side effects from the use of marijuana. Again, nicotine is one thing, but when you add in something that can compare or impair judgment and motor skills, that's another concern. Sometimes youth are vaping and not realizing that THC has been added to the oil or to the cartridge that they're vaping. It's not always clear. So again, that's just a concern in general. And then just the side effects are even stronger for the use of marijuana derivatives. This is just an interesting example. Because some states have legalized marijuana, there are pre-filled cartridges that are available for sale that contain THC. What was interesting is the entire back panel of this box is actually a warning label. But again, how many of us read all these labels of anything that we buy? When we talked about that all these products produce an aerosol, there are concerns not only for the user, but for people in the vicinity. We've all heard of secondhand smoke. That's smoke that impacts people who aren't actually smoking the cigarette. Secondhand smoke can trigger asthma attacks, can trigger other respiratory things in either young people, children, toddlers, or somebody that already has a respiratory issue. The same thing can happen with the aerosol from vaping devices. And again, you're starting with a very heavy, thick, oil-based liquid. You're inhaling it as it's traveled over that heating coil, potential for other particles to get in there. These aerosols, when you think of other aerosols, bug sprays, hairsprays, things like that, when you spray them in the air, you can actually sometimes see particles in the air. The concern with this stuff is that if you're in a small space with somebody who is not vaping, you can actually possibly trigger a respiratory issue or an asthma attack in another person in a confined space. A lot of times you'll see students vaping in cars, especially when it's colder like now, the windows may be closed. You can actually see in some cases, depending on the type of device they use and how often, you can see a film buildup just like it does for smokers in the car windshield. With these oil-based substances, you also get like a stickiness on things like car dashboards. So again, keeping in mind it's an oil-based product. These are just some of the harms that we do know of from secondhand smoke in many years of studies. So in addition to the brain being the most important part of the body and the impact to it occurring into your early 20s and in very major stages, your lungs are still developing into your early 20s. Our lungs are our body's filter. They're on duty 24 hours a day. In general, they have a lot to deal with when you think of all the things that we inhale, especially this time of the year in the Northeast, when you have all the coal burning stoves, wood burning stoves, more smog in the air. We're on the eastern side of the US, so we get all the prevailing winds that take stuff from across the country. So we end up with a lot of particles from other states as the air travels across the country and drives all the chemicals and stuff into the East Coast. Sometimes we get more than our fair share. So again, making people aware, especially young people aware, that their lungs are still developing. Basically, if they can't breathe properly, it's going to dramatically impact their life. Just sitting in a classroom, by the end of the day, they will have taken about 17,000 breaths. Most of them don't think about it. Most of us don't think about it, but there are some people out there who consciously focus on every breath that they try to take. Obviously, we've heard all kinds of information about COVID and respiratory issues. Vaping and smoking irritate the lung tissue. So when you have already irritated your lung tissue, you're more susceptible to respiratory illnesses in general, not just COVID. We try to remind young people that for years we've said, don't share your water bottles at athletic events or social outings just because of passing along the flu or colds, strep throat, mono, just germs in general. They shouldn't be sharing vaping devices either because there's potential to pass along other illnesses. Try to get across to them too, if they're student athletes, things that they may enjoy, even if it's singing or music or theater, but also sports. We've had some students say that they increased through social activities, vaping over the summer, and then went to try out for their fall sports program that they had been part of in the past, and either found it more difficult to make the team or did not make the team after vaping for a few months in the summer. So it can have immediate impact for younger people whose lungs are still developing. Prior to COVID, there was a national outbreak that occurred. It was called EVALI, and it's still on record. Unfortunately, the studies obviously had to be stopped because of COVID. But prior to COVID, there were over 2,800 people around the country hospitalized. This was due to e-cigarette and vaping related lung illnesses. These people were at a point where their lungs were not functioning that well. They either needed to be put on oxygen or respirators. Out of the 2,800, there were 68 who died from various levels of the lung injury and lung health issues. People ranged in age from 13 to 82. So it was a whole mixture of people. It wasn't just young people by any means. Some of the similarities with the people who ended up in the hospital were that they were using knockoff devices. And in some cases, the devices contained both THC and vitamin E acetate. The vitamin E was used as a filler to create more of the vaping liquid. So those are some of the common things that happen. Again, a variety of products, variety of states involved. So it was all throughout the country. One of the people who was hospitalized was a 17-year-old in Michigan. The image on the left is his lungs. You can barely see the outline of the lung because they are so deflated and not functioning. He was actually moved up on the lung transplant list. He had a double lung transplant. The image on the right are his lungs after the transplant. For a while, he was an anonymous person. The case was made public at his choice and his family's, but his name was withheld. Eventually, he was interviewed on TV and he made his case known. So in this case, he was a student athlete. In his case, he had vaped only a few months socially. He didn't even own his own vape device. So he doesn't understand, and he says this during his interviews, why out of the group that he socialized with, he was the only one to get this ill. And they don't know why but for some reason, the vaping really impacted him to the point where he needed the double lung transplant. Again, a very one in a million case. This isn't going to happen to every young person, but it's just the extremeness of it that's interesting. The other thing is double lung transplants do not last forever. Unfortunately, he's probably going to need another surgery, major surgery, in 8 to 10 years. So we have years of studies of cigarette smoking, which is considered a combustible product. We know all the harms, potential for cancers, chronic disease, stroke, heart disease, high blood pressure. Those are known things because we've had a chance to study the use of cigarettes for 50 or 60 years. We cannot put a bunch of young people in a study that are under the legal age to use these products and ask them to vape for 10 or 15 years so that we can figure out how bad their health may or may not get moving forward. So there's a lot of unknowns with vaping as far as long-term health. We just don't know that yet. And unfortunately, by the time we figure it out, it's probably going to be because some people are suffering from different illnesses due to vaping. Just to give you an idea of some of the variety of products out there, again, there's hundreds. These are just some of the more popular things at different times in the last few years. And again, keeping in mind, they're all pretty discrete in size unless they're the tank or the mod systems. And they're all pretty low price points. And we're not talking $165 anymore. Again, buy one, get one sales for a lot of things are $15 or less. This Teros one in the lower right corner, that was an interesting model. It changes color as it heats up, which kind of like the old mood rings. These are popular disposables, meaning that they're activated by inhaling off of it. It's an all-in-one inclusive thing. It's got the flavor already in it. You don't refill it. Again, activated by inhaling off it. It's good. These models were good for 200 to 300 hits of nicotine. Then you would actually throw it away. Over time, you went from 200 to 300 hits of nicotine, various flavors, to now there are devices out there that are considered disposables that have 3,000 hits of nicotine and it's 5% nicotine salt concentration. So again, a higher variety of nicotine. This one was interesting. Again, just looking at some of the ads is interesting. This is promoted as having the fog max air, 6 fruity and appetizing flavors. And then those are the flavors. Then the berries, cherries, and strawberries take your throats and palates to a relaxing spa. So again, the marketing is very flashy. It's makes it sound like a social thing to do. They're colorful devices, colorful images. Some of these devices are very flashy. They have a lot of gadgetry to them. It's kind of a cool looking thing to do. So keeping in mind that the initial e-cigarette or ENDS device was supposed to help smokers quit smoking, the marketing is really targeting younger people at this point. I just did a search to find the most popular products of 2021, and these are the types of things that comes up. This is how the industry categorizes their products. So they have the best pod vape, and that's their choice, and that's the Smoke Novo. And then you have best disposable. That's another brand. Best vape pen, again, just a different style. So again, these are all different styles. Then you get into the more heavy duty stuff. Best vape mod and tank combo. So this is where you get into the mouthpieces and the refillable stuff that we talked about. But what's changed over time is there's a lot of digital readouts on these devices. They're pretty fancy. You can also control the volume of the aerosol. And then you have something called best mods. So again, the technology is really expanding now, and they continue with the flavors and the flashiness. There's a lot of accessories out there. Initially, there were wrappers out there, just like we may decorate or individualize our cell phones. There are ways to individualize your vape. Other accessories. This is interesting, the Juul charger. Juul is spelled J-U-U-L. This company is a knockoff. It's not the Juul company originally, and they spelled it J-U-L-L. And if people weren't careful, just looking quickly, they would thought they were buying a true Juul accessory. Then you have things to hold the vape on the back of your phone, smartwatch vaporizers. There's a whole line of clothing and sweatshirts out there. In this case, Vaporware came up with the tubing. You take the string out of a hoodie sweatshirt and you can run their tubing through it. And then you can attach your vape device on one end and hide it in your sweatshirt and vape in places where you need to be discreet. They were actually warned a couple years ago because of their marketing to young people and the fact that they were promoting tobacco products. Somebody came out with a glove style thing. They were saying a convenient place to hold your USB drive, but I don't know too many people that carry their USB drive outside in the winter in a glove. So this was just another interesting design to make it more discreet to vape. Examples of, just like we said, the attractiveness to younger audiences. The images that have the red square under them are the actual vape e-liquid. And then the image with the black is the traditional food product that we might see in a grocery store. One of the most concerning ones was the lower left. There's a vape liquid out there that was apple juice flavored, and it came very close to looking like the apple juice boxes and some of the packaging that was used for the apple juice. So all in all, the flavors have been a huge impact for younger people trying these products. And again, flavors cover the harshness of the chemicals, make it more appealing to the first-time user. So kind of the flavors we feel are at the eye of the storm when it comes to the vaping epidemic for young people. Ads, back to school ads. Obviously, these are targeting students, not their parents and not their grandparents. This was an ad campaign a couple years ago before COVID. Other things make it socially acceptable to vape, get vaporized, enjoy hanging out with your friends, vaping. The products that have the interesting and fun flavors. Again, Juul was a big one with using social media and influencers to attract younger people to try their products. Cigarette ads used to do the same thing. They used well-known people, athletes, models, movie stars. They also used cartoon characters to try to attract younger audiences. The younger that somebody tries a nicotine product, the more likely they are to continue to use some type of nicotine product as they get older. Again, it's the introduction of nicotine at a young age, triggering the brain to get used to it. The ad on the left is a cool cigarette ad, and then the ad on the right is a Juul ad for vape product from 2016, so it's almost a mirror image. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has put out some messaging. Basically, these products are unsafe for kids, teens, and young adults because your brain is still developing, and for pregnant women. They've also focused on the fact that most of these cigarettes and vapes contain nicotine, which can cause addiction and can harm brain development. So there's a lot of things at play here when it comes to youth e-cigarette use. Again, the flavors, the target marketing, the advertising. You'll see ads for vapes on TV where you don't see cigarette ads. So there's that loophole with advertising as well. You'll see vapes in TV shows. You'll see them on TV ads. You'll see them in movies in some cases, whereas certain PG and PG-13 movies don't have tobacco products. Vapes are still appearing in some of those shows where cigarettes are not allowed. So this is where the New Hampshire law came into play, emphasizing the federal tobacco 21 age requirement for use and possession. Also, anyone that works in a New Hampshire public school is probably familiar with RSA 126K. No tobacco products should be on anyone who enters public school grounds. It includes vapes, e-liquids, devices, empty cartridges, and cigarettes. So overall, some of the public health concerns which we've discussed, just a reminder, and then something of note, 88% of adult smokers started before the age of 18. Again, it's that target audience, that critical age when your brain is still developing. If you introduce substances at a young age when their brain is not fully developed, they are more likely to continue to use some of these substances. Potential signs of vaping. This does not mean that a student or an adult is vaping. These are just some of the signs that come up. Again, the use of these chemicals dries out your respiratory system, dries out your nasal passages, can dry out your mouth, so you may feel more thirsty. Desire for flavor. Because these products are flavored, you would think that wouldn't happen, but it's because your mouth is dried out from the chemicals that you need your food flavors to be stronger. In some cases, people have gotten nosebleeds, again, the drying out of the tissue. For some people, because nicotine can give you that adrenaline rush, they may cut back on caffeine use. And again, just being susceptible to other respiratory issues or colds, things like that, because the tissue in your lungs is irritated. So in the cascade of change, this is important because we're at the bottom where we've changed the norms and the acceptance and perception of cigarettes over time through education and awareness, and actually through studies like public health studies, Surgeon General reports. We know the harms of cigarettes. We're still at the beginning of the cascade of change when it comes to vaping. We're trying to create awareness and information. We don't have the 50 years of health studies. Unfortunately, those are going to come about after the fact as people may have health issues from vaping. So what can we do? Try to share information, create awareness as much as possible. These are some resources that are out there. There are a lot of good, helpful, useful resources that are at no cost. A lot of them do happen to be via computer. That's the hard thing, but a lot of them have downloadable materials if somebody can download them. The NIDA site is good because they have a whole series about the mind matters and just the different things that can occur: drug use, inhalants, marijuana, and then nicotine and vaping. They have packages. They're just 3 to 5 pages long, each of those topics. So it's a good short thing, but there's also a teacher's guide that can be downloaded. This is a fact sheet that the FDA Center for Tobacco Products put out recently, signs and symptoms of vaping and addiction. And then I highlighted the help for teens, teensmokefree.gov, teachers, the scholastic.com, youth vaping risks. Again, a lot of downloadable materials and some lessons. And then the FDA Exchange Lab has a lot of free posters. Some can be downloaded, some can be ordered too at no cost to schools. So this is the landing page of the smoke-free teen page. Other quit services for young adults. Again, they've tried to make some of these interactive text format so that it's more appealing to young people. Here in New Hampshire, we do have, through Department of Health and Human Services, the My Life, My Quit program. It is a vetted program created by National Jewish Health. It's in, I think now 20 or 21 states around the country. This is specifically for youth who are 13 to 17 years old. It's confidential. It is at no cost. The people on the other end of the program are trained to talk with young people about quitting tobacco or quitting vaping. And again, the website itself has a lot of different drop-down menus. Parents, educators, the youth themselves can go onto the website, but also for kids that want to quit, they will get a live quit coach on the other end that can guide them through some resources and tools. If you're over 18, this is the program that is offered also through New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services, Quit Now New Hampshire. This has been around for a long time. Again, you're speaking with a trained quit coach, somebody who is a tobacco treatment specialist that has gone through training to specifically work with people that are trying to quit tobacco products. This is a PDF, a resource list that we provide. I've shared with Darren and Andrea, and I've shared that FDA Center for Tobacco Products PDF as well, and they can forward those or post those. So that's just our slide. Again, I'm happy to answer questions. I'm going to, unless somebody wants me to go back to a particular slide, I was going to get out of the screen sharing mode so that we can possibly take questions. Does that sound okay? Sorry, I kind of rushed through, but I wanted to allow time for you folks to ask questions and for Darren to answer anything that you've noticed in your communities.
Jennifer, I saw you had your hand up, so go ahead if you want to ask your question.
Thanks, Darren. Kim, what does the Juul or the other liquids go through the skin like the patch nicotine will?
I've never had it explained that way. I can ask, we have a retired pulmonologist on our board. I can ask him for comparison. What we were told is, again, depending on, you never know because the solutions are so different, but the concern with little kids is them touching it on a counter where it's been spilled and then touching their eyes or their nose or their mouth and having a really strong reaction. For an adult, the reaction is supposedly not as strong, but it's still going to irritate them. But with young kids licking their fingers or something, that's where you get into the ingestion harm from it.
Okay.
But I'll ask, that's a good question. I'll ask Dr.
you.
Budnitz about the patch versus the way
I could ask him too.
Oh, hi, Kim. I'm watching with my wife, Lisa. I thought that was a very nice presentation, so thank you. Question for you: since the flavored cartridges have been banned, what impact has that had on the incidence of teen vaping? Do we have any data on that?
Not that I'm aware of, and initially it was thought that the ban would be very helpful, but it was also kind of geared at the time to Juul and similar products that were popular, like Soren and Juul, that had pre-filled pods. In other words, back when it started, Juul had, I think, 6, 7 flavors. They had creme brulee, mango, a couple fruity things. They had American tobacco and they had menthol. They were asked to remove the creme brulee and the fruity flavors. That's what that cartridge rule applied to. And again, it was targeting Juul because they were the most prevalent and popular by youth use back at that time. However, when the federal government focused on Juul and the policies focused on Juul, that's when you had started having the introduction of these other devices that are pre-filled all in one, not cartridges, because it's sold as a unit. You don't replace the cartridge. And that's stuff like Puff Bar, Hyde, Teros, there's tons of them out there. They skirted that cartridge law. So it didn't really, in our public health perspective, it didn't really have the impact it could have. It's because these other products that didn't fall under that law came on the market so quickly. Almost like as soon as the FDA passed the regulation, all these other products were popping up, and they were cheaper. Juul started at, like, back when they were selling the starter kits for the charger, some 2 or 3 pods, and the device itself, it was like a $49.95 special. Now you see sometimes they're under $10. I think it's again because there's so many other products out there. So overall, I don't feel that we've heard that cartridge-based policy really had an impact on youth use, unfortunately. And again, it impacted Juul and companies similar to that, but there were so many other products out there that didn't fall under that ruling.
Right.
And
Yeah, I would add too that the 2019 YRBS data for at least the greater Sullivan County area, 6% of our youth stated that they bought their vapor products from the stores themselves. So it will be really interesting to get the 2021 YRBS data to see, now that that law has gone into effect, will that number decrease? We're not sure. The other way that I have it pulled up right now, a lot of the kids are mostly getting them from other people buying it for them, or they're borrowing it from their friends. So I'd say borrowing it from their friends is the biggest way that kids are getting their Juuls or their vapor products, but a pretty high majority are still buying it themselves, which is pretty shocking to me.
yeah, I apologize if I
What's the
didn't make it
repercussions?
clear. The devices that I showed you, the disposables, and you don't need to go into a vape shop to get them. If you go in Irving Gas Station, Cumberland Farms, Market Basket, these are supposed to be behind the counter in the tobacco section, but a lot of these products, or you can get them online. Again, kids probably are not going into vape shops for these purchases. A lot of the vape shops sell the cheap stuff, but they sell the higher end stuff. They want to sell the flavors that they've created, the refillable stuff, the higher end devices. So a lot of this stuff is, and it's inexpensive at this point, the buy one, get one things. It's crazy. Just if you go to get gas, you may just pay at the pump, but sometimes just walk into the convenience store and just take a quick look at what's behind the counter where the cash register is, where the cigarettes are, and just look at the on sale items. And usually there's a couple of vape related products that are on sale, as well as the cigarettes and the skull.
What's the penalty? What's the penalty to selling vaping products to someone under the age of 21? Are the penalties as stiff as they are for selling alcohol to a minor?
No, a lot of times it's warnings to the store owners.
Okay.
And it's, excuse me, not the store owner, the employee who sells the product is the one. And in New Hampshire, one of the unique things for New Hampshire is our tobacco licenses are regulated by New Hampshire Department of Liquor Enforcement. That's who regulates our tobacco sales licenses and the investigation of underage sales. It goes through New Hampshire Liquor Enforcement. So unfortunately, a lot of times the person that gets penalized is the young person purchasing the product if they're caught. Different communities have different ways of handling it. It's usually $100 fine. And then sometimes an additional fee if you go to court. But we're trying to get away from that and do more, instead of punishment, do more education and awareness. And I don't know if you guys, Darren, if you can speak to diversion programs or what's available, but again, the fine is not that heavy. And again, it's usually warnings, the initial time for tobacco sales to underage people. I'm guessing, I think it's 2 or 3 warnings. So it takes a while before they're fined as a store owner.
Great question.
You can, if you're in a community where you feel that there are some underage sales of alcohol or tobacco being done, at the same establishment, you can call or contact liquor enforcement. They want to know because they can't be everywhere. There's a handful of officers in those roles that have to go around the state. You can also make, if your school has a school resource officer, you can make them aware that you feel that, some store, whether it's a Quick Mart or someplace in your community, may be selling to underage purchases. It's just, there are so many other things that law enforcement people are looking at and looking into. They don't always see some of these, especially for tobacco. They're more apt to be aware of alcohol sales to underage people than they are of tobacco sales.
Ellen, I see you have your hand up. Do you have a question?
I just had something to add, actually. Thank you. This was very interesting. I'm really glad I came. My day job is running diversion in Lower Grafton County and Sullivan County. And I can say that we very, very rarely see any kind of a tobacco offense. Once in a while, somebody gets dinged for selling liquor, but I honestly can't remember in the last few years anybody being sent to diversion for a tobacco offense in New Hampshire.
Where did you say you are, Ellen? What part of the city or state?
Lower Grafton County, so Lebanon, Hanover, Lyme, that area, and all of Sullivan County.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think our interaction with schools, we hear about it if the school has contact with a diversion program or has something at the school. That's how we're hearing about it. Not necessarily that, like you said, it just doesn't happen that often for tobacco, for underage sales. We are doing some work with the Merrimack County Diversion Center in Concord, and it was supposed to be the adult program. But every once in a while, we go every couple of months. There are people under the age of 21 that are in the same class with the adults because there's no other place for them to go. So we have a presentation called Breathing Easier, and it's about tobacco, nicotine, and vaping. We kind of combine all those things because usually we're speaking with adults, but I have seen some younger people in that, but again, they're coming from the greater Merrimack County area, not Concord in specific. So I don't hear any information as to how they got placed in the program, like if they were caught vaping at school or if they were caught purchasing and were underage. So I don't get those details, but thank you for the information. Unfortunately, it's a big problem, but again, there are other issues that are more serious or are deemed more serious. Perception of harm for use of tobacco products is not, by many people, is lower on the scale with everything else that people are trying to help young people deal with and manage right now. The problem with it is the fact that nicotine can lead to addiction and can lead to use of other things, just because of the way it works with the brain. So, but I understand when people are focused on other issues too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Ellen, you made me think too. Part of the coalitions that I'm a part of in Sullivan County, the Youth Can and the Compass Coalition, something on our work plans is to do safety checks with all the stores that sell alcohol. And the goal is to have a youth go in and like fake buying alcohol to see if they're gonna give it to the youth. And we do it with alcohol, but we've never talked about doing it with any of the other products. So that's definitely something interesting for us to keep in mind too, to not just focus on alcohol, but also focusing on vapes and cigarettes and other stuff like that.
Right.
And there, I didn't show like that one screen I had, or the slide with the hookah, the orbs, the strips, the sticks, the snuff. There's all kinds of products out there that have nicotine in them that don't even involve vaping or lighting up a cigarette. Those are also flavored a lot of times. And the newer ones of that product line are dissolvables versus disposables. The dissolvables you leave in between your cheek and your gum. It's in a little pouch. It doesn't create as much juice and natural juice in your mouth, so you don't have to spit like you do with some of the other tobacco products. But those are all flavor based too. And I'm not just menthol. It's, you know, the berries and the mangoes, and I'm like, it's amazing. When we think back to cigarette regulations, there are no flavored cigarettes legally on the market. The only flavor is tobacco and menthol, because 20 or 30 years ago, we discovered that if we had flavored cigarettes were appealing to much wider range of audiences and people who would never consider smoking. So they eliminated flavored cigarettes years ago. We knew that flavors would be a problem for attracting younger people. But then we have these multitude of products out there that are not cigarettes, that all are flavor based. I do appreciate everybody hanging out this evening, and I wanted to thank All Together and Sullivan County for the invitation to share our information. We're happy to, again, visit people, share this program. We have content for middle school, high school age students, as well as adults. We've tried to, it's times we can shorten the presentations, try to make it fit. This is the long one. This was everything. So it's a little bit longer for the adults. We don't do anything this long with students for a variety of reasons. And we also don't show all the same slides. They kind of know where they can buy stuff. So we get into a little bit less detail. It's more about potential health impacts when we're talking with young people. No, I do appreciate you sharing too what you've noticed, either where you work or the communities you live in or the people you work with, because that's one way we find out more. Because by the time the YRBS comes out, it's going to take a few months to get it done and then another few months to get it published. So it's nice to have some feedback from people in these individual communities.
I definitely agree. Does anybody else have any questions before we let you all go and enjoy your night?
Yeah, feel free to contact me at Breathe New Hampshire. I know the number was up there real quick. Here at our office, it's 603-669-2411. And my extension's 104, but usually one of us answers the phone live. We try to do that. My email is K for Kim. My last name is Coronis, so it's K Coronis, CORONIS at breathe, BREATHENH.org, O-R-G. But we're happy to try to help you. Even if you don't want our Vaping Unveiled content or program, if there's other resources we can help you find, we're happy to do that. And I know Darren and All Together and Sullivan County have a ton of stuff too that they can help you with.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to send out the recording as well as resources that Kim has sent me to. So stay tuned for that.
appreciate everyone's time. I know now it's dark, even though the time changed, so it's late. So thank you all for joining us, and thanks for the invitation.